Chapter 22 of the Boy Scouts' First Campfire. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by K. Hand. The Boy Scouts' First Campfire by Herbert Carter. The Patched Shoe Again. Those on the shore, after the bugle's sad refrain had been silenced, gave the departing adventurers a last cheer and a wave of their campaign hats. Over the water sounds carry unusually clear, and Thad and his mates smiled when they distinctly heard Stephen bawling from the interior of the tent where he had his sleeping quarters. "Hey, you fellers, which one of you hid my coat? None of your tricks now. Don't I know that I hung it up all right last night when I came to bed, and blessed if I can find it now. Funny how it's always my things that go wandering around loose. Own up now, and whoever hid it, just come right in here and show me where it is." "The same careless Stephen," remarked Thad, "always leaving his things around loose, and then ready to accuse someone else of hiding them. To hear him talk you'd believe in the bad fairies, and that they just took their spite out mixing his clothes and things up, while he slept. I wonder if he can ever be cured of that trick. He'll never pass for a merit badge till he does, that's sure. Neatness in a scout is one of the first things to be won." Davy was handling the paddle. While he did not show the proficiency that the Maine boy, Allan Hollister, could boast, or Bob White, who loved anything pertaining to the water, still Davy did manage to keep the prow of the canoe in a fairly straight line for the island, as he dipped first on one side, then on the other. Thinking the chance to show Davy a few points in the art of paddling ought not to be lost, the scoutmaster took the spruce blade, which was a home-made one, from his hands. By turning the canoe around and using the stern as the bow, he was able to illustrate his meaning easily enough. "Now, it is not necessary to change from one side to the other as often you do, Davy, when you have a breeze blowing like it is now, and you're heading across it. By holding the blade in the water this way after a stroke, it serves in place of a rudder and checks the turning of the canoe under the influence of the push. And another thing, you reach too far out. That helps to whirl the boat around in a part circle. Dip deeply, but as close to the side of the canoe as you can." Davy was a ready observer, and not above picking up points from one who knew more than he did. And presently, profiting from these plain hints, he was able to make easier progress. "Why," continued Thad, "Allan tells me that among the expert canoemen up in his state of Maine, lots of them wouldn't be guilty of lifting the paddle out of the water at all, and make swift work of it, too. You see in creeping up on a deer that it is feeding on the lily pads in the shallow water near the shore, just around a point perhaps, the water dipping from the paddle when it was raised, or even the gurgle as it came out, would give warning of danger, and about the only thing they'd know about that deer would be its whistle as it leaped into the brush. So they always practice silence in paddling, till it gets to be second nature, Allan tells me." "Say, I certainly do hope we get a chance to see that same thing for ourselves," remarked Davy. "I've heard and read a heap about Maine, and always wanted to get there. Since Allan's been talking about his life in the pine woods, that feeling's just grown till I dream of it at nights, and imagine myself up there." "And I'd like to go along too, if my mother could be persuaded to let me," was what Smithy said, a little doubtfully, for he had been so long tied to his mother's apron strings, as the other boys called it, that he could not believe she might overcome her fears for his safety enough to let him go far away. Nevertheless, Smithy had now one full breath of what it meant to be a boy with red blood in his veins, and he was inwardly determined that never again could he be kept in bonds, while the smiling open air beckoned, and these splendid chums wanted his company. All this while good progress had been made, and they were now drawing close in to the island. It lay there, looking calm and peaceful in the morning sunlight. A few birds flew up from along the shore, some of them teeter snipe that had been feeding. Davy even pointed with his paddle to a big gray squirrel that ran along a log in plain view, and sat up on his haunches as if to curiously observe these approaching human beings who intended to invade his haunts. "What's that bird out yonder on the water?" asked Smithy, just then pointing beyond a spur of the island. "That's a loon," remarked Thad. "Allan heard him drop in here last night, and both of us happened to be awake when he gave one of his cries. You'll be apt to hear him some time or other, and if you think it's a crazy man laughing, why just remember they named that bird rightly when they called him a loon." "I don't see anything moving on shore. Anyhow, there's no man in sight," Davy remarked a minute later, as they drew in still closer. "Oh, I didn't expect to see a crowd waiting to receive us," laughed Thad. "We may have all our trouble for our pains, but I just couldn't rest till I got one more squint at that imprint of a shoe on the island." "Oh, yes, I remember that Bob White was telling me about you being taken up with that track," Davy went on, "but he didn't say just why. Perhaps you'll show me, now that I'm along on the trip?" "Sure I will, and tell you a few things I got from him," the scoutmaster went on to say as they pushed in toward the little beach where the landing had been made on the first occasion of their visiting the lake island. "Bob must have been through some stuff in his old home," remarked Davy enviously, "from the few little things he said. Things happen there in the Blue Ridge Mountains, down in the old Tar Heel state. Up here it's as dead as a doornail, nothing going on at all to make a feller keep awake. Don't I just hope you get that deal through, Thad, and take the whole patrol along, to pay a visit to Bob's home country. I just know we'd have a scrumptious time of it. Imagine me up in the real mountains, when I've never seen a hill bigger than Scrub Oak Mountain, which I could nearly throw a stone over." Then the prow of the canoe ran aground in a few inches of water. Thad sprang ashore, and holding the painter, drew the boat in closer. Relieved of his weight in the bow, its keel grated on the dry sand, and the other two were able to step out easily enough. They drew the boat up good and far on the beach. "The wind's liable to get even stronger than it is," remarked Thad, "and we don't want a second experience of having the canoe blown out on the lake." "I should say not," observed Smithy, uneasily, for he had only recently learned how to swim, and the shore seemed a tremendous distance away, with the flag of the camp floating in the morning breeze, and the tents showing plainly against the green background. "Now, this time I'm going to comb the whole island over, and see what's here," announced Thad, resolutely. "You see, we can make a start, and keep close to this shore until we strike the other end. Then, changing our base, we'll come back this way, keeping just so far away from our first trail. After that it's back again, and in that way we ought to see all there is." "Going to be pretty tough climbing, I reckon," remarked Davy, surveying the piled-up rocks, of which the island seemed to consist mainly, with the trees growing from crevices, and in every odd place, so that they formed a dense canopy indeed. "That'll make it more interesting, perhaps," said Smithy, and Thad nodded his head encouragingly, for he liked to see evidences in the spoiled boy tending to show what his real nature must be, back of the polish his fond mother and maiden aunts had succeeded in putting upon his actions in the past. They reached the other end of the island and began to make the return trip. As Davy Jones had said, it was strenuous work at times, since the rocks were piled up in a way to suggest that some convulsion of nature had heaved this island up from the bottom of the lake. "Just see the black holes, would you?" Davy declared again and again. Why, lots of 'em'd make the finest kind of fox dens, and I reckon a wolf wouldn't want a better hiding place than that big one over there. Say, Thad, I could crawl in easy myself, and I'd like to do it for a cookie now, if you said the word." "Not just yet, Davy," remarked the scout leader, who began to wonder himself if the men of the island might not be hiding right then in one of the cavities Davy had pointed out. "We want to see what the place is like, you know. Come along, and in a jiffy we'll be at the end where our boat lies." "But what are you keeping on looking so close at the ground whenever we strike any soil at all, Thad?" the Jones boy continued. "Suppose now you think you might run on that footprint Bob was speaking about, say?" "Just what was in my mind, Davy," replied the other, always willing to give information to those with him. "I wanted you to see what it looked like, so you and Smithy here could be keeping on the watch. If we found that it made a regular trail, and led to one of these same black holes, we'd know more than we do right now. There, I saw a track, but it wasn't a clear one. Hold on, and let's see what this patch of open ground will show up." "This suits me to a dot," remarked Davy. "Feels quivery like, you know, just like something queer was a going to happen right soon. Wonder if there's any wildcats loose over here. I'd like to get a whack at one with this club. Wouldn't I belt him a good crack between the eyes? Hello! Found what you wanted, Thad?" The scoutmaster had come to a sudden stop, and was down on his knees examining something on the ground. He beckoned the others to drop beside him, and both boys did so eagerly. As Davy Jones saw the imprint of the shoe that had a patch on it, he gave a low exclamation, and his eyes sought those of Thad. "Well, what do you think of that now, Thad?" he muttered. "The same patch shoe that feller with the bear man was telling me about. Say, listen, he said that he was looking for a man with a shoe just like that. Yes, sirree, he described it to a hair, and asked me if I ever saw a footprint like that to send word to Malcolm Hotchkiss up at Faversham." Thad felt a thrill at these words, for he realized that they meant there must be some connection between the supposed hobo who accompanied the owner of the dancing bear, and the two men who were hiding on the island. End of chapter 22.